Well, since coming into office, the Trump administration has sought out different ways to carry out mass deportations, including going deep into the history books. Our Catalina Villegas is talking with an expert this morning to help us understand these policies and also their impacts. Kat.
Yeah, that's right, Kelv. We're going to focus this part of the conversation on the foreign terrorist organizations designation that President Trump has given to cartels and gangs. For more on that, we now turn to University of Tampa Professor Abigail Hall. Her research focuses on issues related to defense, war, and peace. Her work also includes analysis of terrorism and counterterrorism, as well as the economics of propaganda. Super interesting stuff. Thank you so much for joining us, Professor.
Absolutely. Thank you.
So how does President Trump's designation of gangs and cartels as foreign terrorist organizations amplify his powers to go after these units and these groups as well as their members?
So it certainly places a greater emphasis on these various organizations as targets for intensive or more intensive scrutiny. But it really, I think, provides a mechanism or a method for the administration to really try to crack down additionally on what it perceives as being an immigration problem. Rhetorically, I think that this is probably doing more on that side than anything else. The legal ramifications here are frankly really unclear, because the president or the U.S. government doesn't need any wartime power to detain and deport individuals who are not permanent residents or U.S. citizens. But rhetorically, I think this is doing a lot of work where it is really increasing or trying to portray these various groups, Tren de Aragua being the most recent one, that these groups are pervasive and are particularly dangerous. And so from generating popular support for these policies, I think that is a primary motivator for utilizing this specific policy.
And probably not a coincidence that not only Tren de Aragua was named as a foreign terrorist organization, but now its members are being deported under the Alien Enemies Act. Professor, the Trump administration has decided to invest $200 million on an ad campaign to advertise its work on this front. How does that play into this conversation?
So I think it definitely, again, highlights the idea that they're working to deliberately gain popular support. So within the context of the most recent deportations, there is, of course, this very explicit statement by the Trump administration that these are all Venezuelan gang members. Statistically speaking, I find that really, really hard to believe and wholly unlikely. The idea that all of them are some members of a terrorist enterprise is frankly just really difficult to believe statistically in terms of what we know about migrants and their rates of criminality, much less rates of terrorism, which are a subset of that. And so it's going to be really interesting to see how these types of ads or what this push does in terms of generating support or frankly criticism for the administration's policies.
Got it. And we've spoken about the Alien Enemies Act. We've spoken about the foreign terrorist organization designation. What other wartime or terrorism laws and practices might be used by the administration for immigration purposes?
So it's really difficult to tell precisely what types of things might be pulled off the shelf, we could say, from historical law. One of the things that we've witnessed historically is the use of things like the Espionage Act as a means to prosecute whistleblowers. So you look at people like Daniel Ellsberg and the Pentagon Papers, or more in a more contemporary sense, individuals like Thomas Drake or Chelsea Manning. So it wouldn't surprise me at all if we see some of these historical pieces of legislation come to be used in a way which isn't intended. And that, I think, is a really important point for us to take away from this. When people hear that a law that was enacted in the 1700s is being utilized in 2025, we have to start really asking questions about whether or not that law, which again was implemented for the purposes of assisting the U.S. in wartime, is fundamentally appropriate to be used in a time of peace, and again, to utilize or to try to achieve goals which are really outside of the scope of what the law was written for.
Indeed, we see that the administration is looking for different ways to approach this issue that they see as immigration, and they're trying to use different policies and laws to try to meet their mass deportation agenda, which they laid out in the campaign trail. So we'll have a lot to talk about in the coming weeks and months. I'm sure there'll be a lot more information. But Professor Abigail Hall, expert in defense, war, and peace, thank you so much for your time and your expertise on this subject.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Kel, tossing it back to you for now.
All right. Thank you, Catalina. Thank you so much for the insight from the professor as well.